informative, educational, objective, inclusive, comprehensive. This is Progress Report. Updates and conversations from the Government Information Service.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Progress Report, updates and conversations from the Government Information Service. My name is Ivan Khanna, my co-host Gleneva Hodge, and we have the Honorable Premier, Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster, back with us today. Thank you very much, Premier, for coming back on the show so soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, so we're gonna touch on health today. Health is wealth. To say that means so much. There's a lot of things that are going on globally where health is concerned. We're still on the tail end of a pandemic. Anguilla has its fair share of concerns, its fair share of programs and things that people want to know about where health is concerned. So we have the Honorable Premier, who's also the Minister of Health, here with us today. And we're just going to talk it up for a bit so we get a little bit of a health checkup.
I like that.
If you want to call it.
Yes.
All right.
So, welcome, Dr. Webster. Thank you for being here with us again. Like Ivan say, you are our first repeat guest.
Yeah.
Yes, so
Awesome.
we are happy to have you with us. And so, let's get into, like Ivan said, a health checkup.
Yes.
Awesome.
So broadly speaking, we are on the tail end of a pandemic right now.
Well, we hope.
We hope.
We're not sure about that, but we're certainly better than we were.
Better than we were, and I tend to speak very positive, and I affirm. So,
Good.
thanks for the check right there. But we've fared very well, if we must admit. We've seen the conversations about the non-vax and the vax, and that debate that people try to have played out in public. And one of the things that I told people is, and it's something that you said over and over, Anguilla wasn't in a position to take on that level of a health crisis. How many beds did we have in the isolation unit?
Do we have?
Well, we have 10 beds.
10 beds.
8 ventilators.
8 ventilators.
Yes, and certainly there were times when all the beds were filled.
That
and
is
some
true.
persons were on ventilators.
That is true.
Thank God. So far we've come through okay, but we had 9 people died,
That is
that's
true.
certainly 9 too many.
And you said that over and over, Premier. So for me, just before we dig a little deeper into where we're at, where health is concerned right now, I want the listening public to understand that these measures were not taken to ostracize or isolate anybody. Because truth be told, and I heard we have some doctors, Anguillan doctors abroad, that spoke to this, like, Anguilla, you don't want to be full-blown with this thing, you know? So it's a little disheartening that some things like that can be played out when the rationale is there. When we have so many people at risk, I applaud the closing of the senior citizen homes from visitors. I applaud closing the schools. Those things were, I think, that those helped us to fare well. What do you think?
I agree. And, it's unfortunate, and it is human nature. And I'll say that I don't think that there'll ever be an issue where everyone, can agree and will say we're going to move in this one direction.
Right.
And so we saw a lot of that play out. We saw it playing out on a global scale, not just locally, but we saw it playing out. My question would be, how do you feel about the politics that played into pushing that narrative? Because, again, not just locally, but we saw that play out internationally as well, with the way that politics had a role to play in that great divide, if I may.
Certainly, and you would think that COVID was a health crisis, is a health crisis, and it should have stayed as that, but
crisis,
it
right.
became a political football,
Right.
Because you could fall on either side, whether, you believed that it was real, and whether you think it was man-made or that it was formed in a lab, whether you think it was China versus America, etc.,
Right.
or whether you think that you should take the vaccine or not. These issues, certainly individuals can agree to disagree.
Right.
But when the science shows that the vaccine would help
Right.
to decrease the chance of infection, to decrease the chance of transmission of the disease, and also to decrease the chance of severe disease and hospitalization and death, I think that people should have accepted that more, and I think we would have been better off and further ahead right now
Yeah.
if that had been the case, where people accepted it. And certainly, I see COVID as one of those things that could have decimated Anguilla.
Wow. Yeah.
Could have wiped out the country. I mean, you saw what was happening in other parts of the world.
Very
Hundreds,
close.
thousands, millions of people have died.
Yes.
And if in Anguilla we had severe community spread,
Yeah.
just imagine how many people would have died. We had a healthcare system that before the pandemic was not ready. We did not have an isolation room.
Right.
We had to take, basically half of the psychiatric unit and convert it into a isolation unit.
Yes.
Get 10 beds out of that. We didn't have the ventilators for that. Those had to be brought in. A lot of this was donated by the United Kingdom government.
Right.
The PPEs, personal protection equipment, the masks, the gloves, the testing equipment,
Yes.
the tests themselves,
Yes.
and then the vaccines came. And so I think that all in all, we have fared fairly well, but we could have done better.
Yes, I agree, and I don't want to segue, but I'm touched by a story of a close friend, and he has a video on YouTube. I remember when I started talking to him about the vaccine, he was like, yeah, he doesn't trust the mRNA stuff. He's gonna wait a bit. He's gonna see what comes out of Cuba, and then he ended up catching COVID and like almost died, like literally almost died. Like, I would share his story with anybody, and then is when it got really, really real for me, because I'm like, this is somebody I talked on a basis. Then he just fell off.
Yeah.
And another close friend of ours, a mutual friend, I consider these guys my brothers, and they was like, okay, well, yeah, he got COVID and he's hospitalized and it doesn't look good. So now you're praying and you're hoping, and you're praying and you're hoping some more. Mm-hmm. And then when he's out and outside of it, he actually told his story, and he was like, yeah, get the vaccine, protect yourself, because this is what it is. So for me, I understand the, what do you call that stuff again? The conspiracy theories, if you want to call it that. I understand people's positioning on a certain issue. You're free to make your own decisions, but at some point, you just go to the doctor, and nobody could tell me what's in their high blood pressure medication, but they take it.
Certainly.
Nobody could tell me what goes on when you go there for an emergency and they put some stuff in your arm, but all of a sudden you feel better.
Right.
But you take it. But to play out in public debate, and I'm not getting in anybody's opinion or anybody's face, but I'm just saying, like, we can be a little bit more responsible and get our news and our communication from a reputable source.
Agreed.
Because like that back channel from YouTube where they have this dark room and this, and then the radio stations that would play out with all the epidemiologists and part-time economists and everybody else and global strategists all in one encapsulation. I would just stay away from that. But when I hear talk about that much more, I just needed to place that there.
I can tell you needed to get that off your chest.
I needed to get it off my chest because I still see some of it trying to play out, and it's disheartening.
Yes, it is. But I'm hopeful that we've passed through the worst of it.
Me too.
And that we are looking forward. So the question is, we know where we've come from. We know what we've dealt with.
Yes.
Where are we now? I know that we have, as a country, we've lifted mask mandates.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Ivan spoke a little bit about the restriction on visits to the senior citizens' home. Where do we stand on that? Are those visitations still restricted? Are they open? I know they're persons with loved ones who have not had that interaction for some time. So where are we on that?
Well, certainly, as you know, we still have closed borders to unvaccinated visitors, and that we are watching and looking at persons coming in to see. We still allow unvaccinated residents of Anguilla to come in. And we are monitoring to see what the positivity rate is. We have picked up persons coming in who test negative outside, and when they get here, test positive. Or when they're ready to leave, have tested positive on the outgoing test. So we know that we're not completely safe, but we are looking at and trying to measure the risk. In terms of visiting to senior citizens' homes, that is doable for family members, of course. Now, the mask mandate is lifted, except businesses can choose whether they want persons to be masked when they come into their establishments. Certainly, we recommend that in closed, offices or buildings with poor ventilation, that masking is still, should be the role should be done, especially if you can't social distance.
That is true.
In terms of the hospital itself, there was a time when we didn't allow elective surgery. That is now possible. Still test when you come into the hospital if you're going to be admitted or have surgery to make sure that you're COVID negative. And we want to protect everyone, especially our frontline workers. And our vulnerable, the elderly especially. So in multi-generational homes, we do recommend that if possible, social distancing, but also know your status. If you
that's the important thing.
Yes, if you feel that you've been exposed to someone with COVID or the possibility of COVID, get tested. It's available at the Ministry of Health. It's free to go and get that type of testing, and that's what responsibility, personal responsibility, is the word of the day. Do that. And I think that we can protect ourselves.
And that's something important to note. The testing is free. You're on island. You're feeling a little sniffles. If it ain't the sinus like I just have to struggle with, and you've probably been exposed, just go get tested. It's the responsible thing to do.
Is this our way of saying this is how we live with this virus?
Definitely. I think the world has come to that conclusion. It's not going away completely. We have to live with it. But we do it in that safe manner, and we have to, do the hygiene measures. We have to make sure that we social distance as best we can. But we don't want to be shut down like we were. We want to get back to our usual activities. We want to be able to do the boat races. You want to be able to,
So you must know, I'm not going to cut you off, Premier, but you must know boat races are talking here that I actually have to abstain from the last show. I was made to be silent because I touched on light and peace, and I say something about a UFO, and then there's people in my inbox talking about a UFO. I ain't calling Cam name, but I'm just saying that it's touchy. So if you're ready for that talk, especially given that, we coming off the Anguilla Day boat races, we can have that talk.
I understand. It's really hard. It's really hard when
I know. Let's leave it right
here. Today is about health, and I think it's important for our listening audience to understand some context. We are having this conversation prior to the Anguilla Day boat race. Yes, it will be aired after the race, and so it is important that they understand that, the biggest race of the year is coming up.
It's important that we understand that in all these things, let light be a guiding principle and let there be peace. I put that together for you.
And you know that you did say you're a positive person, optimism, and so I will accept that for how you said it. But winning is also good for your health. Flying objects.
I must say,
unidentified flying objects at that.
If I see a unidentified flying object, I may have to reach to the hospital.
So we get back.
So we getting right back there, because I know if we allow you guys to go out on the boat race talk, we're gonna have some high blood pressure out there.
Well, we're gonna be far down the road. Let's just leave it as that.
just getting back into it, one of the things that's interesting to me, and I know Ivan, we are at the tail end. I think this is Mental Health Month.
Yes.
May is celebrated as Mental Health Month,
Awareness
and
Month, yeah.
we were really hoping to be able to do something on that, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can still do so in the future.
Yes.
You spoke about utilizing space from the psychiatric ward to accommodate the COVID-19. What is that situation now? Where is the psych ward in terms of the space that's needed and any additional support that they are receiving?
Well, certainly, mental health is important. Just before we go there, I just want to remind people that May the 17th was, World Hypertension
Hypertension
Day,
Day.
and we had encouraged people to come out, get tested, know
Right.
their blood, know the numbers,
Yes.
know your blood pressure, and so that you can work. So, still encouraging persons to get tested, go to
Yes.
their doctor, go to the hospital, go to the clinics, get your blood pressure tested, so that you know where you are. Because to ignore that can lead to other
A lot
issues.
more issues.
But getting back to the psych unit, as I said, we had to take half of it to do isolation. That is still the case. We are now building a new dialysis unit.
Okay.
And with that, we want to expand that to include an isolation ward.
Okay, nice.
So far, we've got funding from the UK for a dialysis unit. And we expect, though, that we will make the building big enough so that when it's time, we can include the isolation ward in there and get the psychiatric unit back up to the size it was, modernize it so that it can care for the patients that are in there.
That's excellent.
The other thing I wanted to say is that we've also put in the budget for this year to get a on-island psychiatrist. So we have funding for that and more nurses.
Nice.
Because, if we ignore that
side of
health,
Yes.
we certainly will pay
Yes.
for it in the end.
That is true.
We can't allow our people to not, to be seen early, get
Yes.
treated early, because then you can bring them back as functional members of society.
That is true, and I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate that that's the forethought where that is concerned, because this is something that even I
That-
very concerned about. We've spoken about it off camera, off mic, and we're gonna bring in some folks to talk
Yeah,
about it
def-
because it's something that's really prevalent in our society, if we
It
must
is.
say.
It is, and just mental health as a whole, and we're not speaking necessarily to the extremes,
No.
and it's the things that we don't speak about. It's the things that we don't, and mental health is one of those things that you don't see,
Yeah.
and it's the
Not until it's too
unseen,
late.
Yeah,
right?
very
And it's
late,
the unseen, and we're gonna bring this topic back, but I wanted to just speak just a little bit more on it in terms of legislation surrounding mental health. Do you think that what we have is adequate? If it's not adequate, are there plans to address what is there?
And I don't think the legislation is adequate. And we have to be able to modernize the legislation because areas where we know there are persons who have mental health issues and they're allowed to be on the street walking about, and there's
Yeah.
no legislation that allows anyone to be able to bring them into a center involuntarily,
Right.
unless they're causing,
social
this social disturbance.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's necessary. You have to be able to identify persons who have mental issues and get them into a center where they can be counseled, where they
Yeah.
can be treated, so that they can be, reintroduced into society as functional individuals. And I think this is humane. This is
It
what
is.
is necessary.
It is, because I remember when I was a young boy growing up in Valley School, there was a young man that used to walk around, and everybody was scared of him for some reason, And then,
We're golden horses, we know.
yeah, we know. And then he eventually, his family took him up
Yeah.
and took him after the States, and I think he's, I don't want to use the word reform, but I think he's had some improvement and function in society. I'm not sure, you can't quote me on that. But I've seen still on the opposite end now a number of people just sitting in front of grocery stores, walking the street, and it's
Right.
getting, if you're being honest, there are two young men walking the streets right now that could use some attention.
Certainly.
You understand? There's I don't want to get too deep into it because that's not what we're here for.
But it is a concern. It is a concern for communities. It's a concern. I can remember clearly a few years ago, and it's the reason why I speak about the legislation, because it's been years where I've heard that the legislation was not in place to be able to address some of these issues.
Yeah.
There's a well-known case, and I do not hesitate to speak this openly. There's a well-known case of a gentleman in the western end of the island
Yeah.
who's known to frequent the public roads,
Yeah.
naked,
Yeah.
collection of garbage.
Yeah.
It becomes, at what point do we say,
Let's step in.
let's step in? As a country, we have a responsibility to all citizens.
Definitely.
And so,
Definitely.
again, we're gonna come back to this because it's so heavy, and I think it deserves a show in and of itself.
Yeah.
And
And
I agree.
there's so many facets to it.
I mean, when we came into administration, we found that in the secondary school, that 1 in 5 students had either contemplated or attempted suicide.
Wow.
I mean, think about that.
Wow.
And then so we need to have the counseling. We need to have the exposure. We need to let the people know that this is important and an important part of health. And that there is a move towards that. And even Her Excellency the Governor has taken on that mental health is one of the pillars of health that needs to be addressed urgently.
Premier, that is too much, eh? That is too much. 1 in 5.
1 in 5, yes.
Yep.
That is too much.
These statistics are not new to me. It is heavy. It is.
Yes,
And
understand.
so as we can just. I don't want to table
wanna-
it,
no,
but you can see, it is filling me with emotion
Yes,
because
it
I
needs
have
the
seen
time
it.
for
I
itself.
have seen it firsthand.
That's
We're looking at mental health. We're looking at drug and substance abuse,
Yes.
and so, Ivan, I know it's usually you that have to tell me we're gonna bring this back, but today we're gonna definitely put that on the table for a show that's gonna come up soon.
Wow.
And it is very difficult to segue from that back into health.
Yeah.
And when I speak about health, I mean the physical health.
Yes.
But just like how mental health is a specialized area, we have a need for other specialties and specialized areas within health.
Yes.
Where are we in terms of looking at specialized clinics, making sure that we are being able to access, and as a nation, being able to access those specialized clinics?
Oh, that's a good question. Excellent. And one of the, I don't want to say promises, but one of the things we talked about is having more specialists in Anguilla. And we've looked into it. Certainly, the health authority is limited in terms of funding.
Right.
And, government subvention is over $20 million. And with COVID, that is, the emphasis over the last 2 years has been to, cover COVID. So because we know that was the immediate and urgent threat.
Right.
And now we are looking more at the general health, the non-communicable chronic diseases, and those are, you need specialists for those.
Right.
The other thing that we need specialists for is trauma, because we have a lot of young people or even elderly who fall or
Right.
maybe in accidents and have injuries, and then they have to be shipped overseas because we can't provide orthopedic services.
Right.
And the medical treatment overseas budget has already been busted, and it's only May. And so if for the rest of the year now, we have to do a supplementary budget to move funds from elsewhere
Right.
to cover medical treatment overseas. At times we've had over 20 persons out of the country getting treatment, and government has to cover those, because even if persons sign saying that they will, pay back, government still has to put up the money up front.
Right.
Now, what that requires is if we want to do a supplementary budget, we have to either move funds or we have to then ask the UK to allow us to, increase our expenditure.
Right.
And so to increase our expenditure, you have to find the funding somewhere.
Right.
Now, because, our accommodation tax has, collections have been better than anticipated,
Yeah.
we're hoping that we can do this in short order to make sure that that medical treatment overseas budget is filled back up, because we'll continue to have persons who are sick. But what we need a cardiologist, somebody to deal with hearts as our people get older,
Yes.
as they get more NCDs, we have to be able to treat them here in Anguilla.
That is
We
right.
can't afford to keep sending them overseas. We have to have, one of the things right now, general surgery. And we've had difficulty attracting a general surgeon to Anguilla because what we offer as salary is not enough to attract persons to recruit them here. What we're proposing is that we have to allow, specialists, if they come, they work part-time with Health Authority and they work part-time privately, because that's where they can supplement their income. Now, that has not been looked on favorably in the past, but it is a model that has worked in different jurisdictions. It works in the U.S., it works in St. Thomas, and works in St. Kitts, and else. And I think that's something that we have to look into, because we have to be able to attract specialists here so that people can be treated here. It will cut down on the cost.
That's what I was just about to say. Like, the money that we spend going off to Colombia, Santo Domingo, even some to the States, Puerto Rico, and elsewhere, over the years, like, I know people that come to Anguilla for dialysis because they can't get an appointment in St. Martin, and it's cheaper here.
Right.
Like, extremely cheaper here. I met people that come here for this. So, like, does this mean then that we can look at expanding our medical services here and being somewhat of a hub for something, a specialist environment in the Caribbean? Is that something that we can look at?
Well, you raised that point, and that's something right now we've been talking with Health City Cayman
Okay.
to look at a model where we can provide those services here in Anguilla, not only for our own people here, but persons coming in from the outside, kind of a medical tourism model.
Right, okay.
And so yes, they've been here up until just last week. We've also going to get a review of the Health Authority of Anguilla to see if it's meeting the needs of the people.
Right.
Because right now we feel that this is the service that is possible. One of the goals is that we want to move the Health Authority back under the Ministry of Health.
Okay.
That was supposed to happen already. Why it hasn't happened yet is because we are so concentrated on treating COVID
Right.
or mitigating against COVID that we didn't want to disrupt the service through the administrative aspects of it.
Okay.
But that is, the committee has been named, and it's just a matter of meeting to discuss how best to do that. One of the things that requires is we do an analysis of the hospital, the public clinics, health in general.
Right.
And we're talking with Health City Cayman now to look at it from that holistic approach
right.
to determine what's the best way to deal with healthcare services in Anguilla, how to provide it, how we can have specialists, whether they are seconded from there to us or we get our own people in that we are paying for that then can also do private practice to supplement their incomes.
Right.
Because the goal is to have those healthcare services provided in Anguilla for Anguillians, and also to attract others in so that can provide the foreign direct capital that is
Right.
necessary to support those services.
Right.
You actually touched on something that I've often wondered about. If you combine, if you look at the BOTs and the population within the BOTs specifically individually, it's not great.
Correct.
But if you combine the populations of the various BOTs within the region, do you think that it would then be feasible to say, if you were to combine Montserrat, BVI, Anguilla, and TCIR Cayman, and on a rotating basis, you say, well, okay, Anguilla cannot afford a cardiologist full time, but if we were to share a cardiologist 1 week in each of the BOTs within the region, and then you you circulate. So the cardiologist, the cardiologist is in Anguilla the first week of every month, and they hold clinics. Is that something that, at the BOT leaders, I know you have those meetings, is that something that has been considered to be able to provide more specialist services at an affordable rate? Is that something that's been considered?
The issue has come up, certainly having rotating specialists. One of the issues, maybe not for a cardiologist unless you're going to put in a cath lab, which would be very expensive, and then to do one in each territory and have the cardiologist going that. But orthopedics, if you think about it, would be very expensive for one to be going to each different territory if they're performing the surgeries that are necessary because of the cost of equipment. So it may be better to have one central one that that would do. So you have a center of excellence, say, for orthopedics, or a center of excellence for cardiology, or a center of excellence for nephrology, those types of things. If you do centers of excellence and then the persons come, I think that you can do that on a more expedited manner, and also what is cost effective, because then I think it would be cheaper. We can, subsidize those costs better. If it's all done within that type of a network.
Okay, that's excellent, and it's good to know that something like that is at least on the table, because I often yearn for more collaboration.
Yes.
Where those things are concerned, we're only so big. And shared costs becomes little costs.
Right. And we can even do it with, the OECS or CARICOM.
Right.
I mean, these are things, I think, as we realize that the cost of healthcare is escalating.
Yes.
And we have to, mitigate for different diseases now.
Yes.
And I know that, we're talking about monkeypox now.
Yes.
What's the next big pandemic that might be coming? It may be necessary as a region that we come up with these, where we subsidize each other so that it keeps down the cost to our people.
I am happy that that's now made public, that's the level of thinking and conversation that's going on. Because that collaboration right there is necessary.
Yes.
On so many fronts, we struggle as.
But is it something that, sorry, Ivan, but is it something that's new? Because people may not know in terms of the purchasing of medication. Is that not done on a collective basis through OECS? Am I mistaken on that?
No, that's correct. Yes, through St. Lucia, the OECS PPS does. They do bulk purchasing, and then the different islands will get from that center. There is also a move to reduce trans fats in foods that are imported into the region. That is also has been tabled. There's a lot of things. Also, food security. That we want by 2025, 25% of the food that is imported should be reduced so it's only 25% imported into the region. So these are all different aspects where the regional integration is allowing us to think of ourselves for economies of scale as, instead of small island developing states, we're one big territory.
Yes.
And now if we can work together to help each other, which I think is necessary because we are one people. We're just separated by bodies of water.
That is true. And my thing is, I remember back in sixth form in economics, Miss Lice Hazel, she was my economics teacher, and she gave, we did the economics, the 2 units in Cape, and we looked at the macro first. Now we got into the micro. There's where the appreciation of those things that you speak about happen, and I'm happy that things are being looked at that scale. We can be doing a lot more where even other things are concerned. I'm happy to hear about the importation of foods and stuff, because those things bust our budgets.
Yes.
Yeah, and it directly contributes to our health. The type of food that we eat.
Right.
There is that direct correlation between what we eat and who we are.
That is true.
And the value of our health. So it's, it is important that we look at these things. And I brought that up because I know that there are a number of persons who may not be aware that there is that collective buy-in,
Certainly.
at least as it relates to medication. And
Right.
I thought it important that persons are aware
Yes.
that this is currently happening, and I'm happy to hear that we're looking at expanding it into different areas.
Definitely.
So touching on the topic of those regional shared costs and initiatives, I noticed that we have like a lot of nurses from off. I don't like to talk
Throughout the
about
region,
Throughout the region.
yes, our regional
Yeah.
counterparts.
That used to bother me when I was in school, and they used to say, "Oh, you from Dung Island?"
I do not like it.
I don't like it at all.
No.
It is very xenophobic in nature, and it's something that I think that we need to actively work to eradicate from our vocabulary.
You know that point where your mother disciplined you, it just she gave me the look again. I wish she gave me the look.
We're not.
If she had a strap, we would have been spanked, right?
And I'm just giving my story, but it's so rooted and all. Okay,
Yes,
all right,
yes,
let me get
it
that.
is.
So we have a number of nurses from our regional neighbors and family and friends, and everybody's connected.
Yes.
But we have a lot of nurses and doctors that are in Gwillian that are abroad in the US as well.
Correct.
Dentists as well. When they come home and they want to contribute, donate of their time and their services, is that allowed? Can you share anything on the procedure? How do we tell those out there, when you come home on vacation, you grew up on the beach, take 2 hours and go by the hospital.
How do we encourage that?
How do we
You know?
encourage that?
Certainly.
How do we encourage them to say, hey, listen, there's a specialist case here that might just be able to use a second opinion. See if you can lend some time. Because I know a lot of them are willing to do that.
Definitely.
But where do they contact? Do they contact the ministry? Do they contact U.S. Minister of Health? Do they contact Princess Alexandra Hospital, the CEO? What's the process?
They can contact anyone
Okay.
of whether the minister, the ministry, the health authority. Certainly, we would encourage that. I've always said it should be reciprocal. If you're registered in the U.S., the U.K., and the Caribbean as a health professional, it should be automatic in Anguilla, provided that your record is good.
Right.
And if you're registered elsewhere, I think that should be fine. However, given liability and malpractice and things like that, it would be necessary to register to be able to work in Anguilla if someone's coming.
Okay.
Nurses are not registered, but doctors, pharmacists, dentists have to be. And so
Okay.
I was registered in Anguilla to practice in Anguilla since 1999, but I didn't come back to work in Anguilla until 2010.
Okay.
So these are the things that I would encourage Anguillians who are abroad to get registered,
Okay.
so that if you do decide you're home on vacation, you want to put in some time at the hospital or put in some time in an office here, or just health fairs,
Right.
to do preventive work, to do screenings, then you're ready to do that. So I would encourage that, and there is a medical board that does look at the
Okay.
applications, look at the credentials, and give authorization to be registered. That can be done. Now, if we have, say, an Anguillian who's a specialist who is here, if we needed emergency services, certainly that can be done also.
Okay.
It goes through Executive Council with the blessings of the board,
Right.
and that would be, it can be done. But persons who want to volunteer, if you're a nurse and you want to come in and volunteer, I think that just requires you have to talk to a health authority,
Okay.
and then they certainly would look at that. There's a chief, there's no chief nursing officer in the Ministry of Health now. That position is open.
Okay.
But there is a director of nursing services at Princess Alexandra Hospital. Those can be worked out.
Okay. I just one thing, Gleneva. I remember a couple of years back, you had a number of doctors came in. You were going to the same thing. Tell us about that. Is that something that we can see again in short order.
Yeah, certainly, that was supposed to be continuous, whether annually or every or twice a year, because of COVID. In fact, the last one we had was in end of February, first week in March of 2020, just before the world declared Health Organization declared the pandemic, and I think that scared them, some people traveling at that time.
Right.
Now that we're getting back to where you don't have to quarantine when you come in,
Right.
if you're vaccinated, boosted, I think the doctors are now, they have been able to get back into their practices
Right.
because they were practicing mostly by telemedicine. Now they're back in their practice, and so they should be able to travel again soon. And that will be, in short order. We're working on getting
Excellent.
another contingent. We've actually had offers from the Panama Clinic. They had their marketing people were here a few
yes.
months ago with Dr. Adams, and they've offered that they can send in some specialists to help us with these
excellent.
health fears. Certainly clinic in Colombia, where we
Right.
send a lot of our patients. They're willing to also send specialists out to do some of those screenings.
Excellent.
And it's good for them, and certainly the network that I'm part of will be doing that. So in short order, we'll get back to that
That's good.
because, ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure,
Yes.
and we
Yes.
believe that we have to get back where we are picking up these diseases early so that you have a better chance of curing them
Right.
rather than waiting until you have full-blown disease, and then all we're doing is doing palliative treatment, which is really depressing to me as a doctor.
Totally understand.
The pandemic also had another effect, and you hear about it internationally. How have we dealt with doctor, nurse, healthcare burnout post-pandemic? We're getting into the heavy stuff. I'm sorry, but that is
a real concern. I've had a lot of my peers have basically hung up their stethoscope and said we can't do this because they were pushing very hard from day one, even before the pandemic was declared. They were pushing very hard, and then throughout that time you saw it was the frontline workers that basically were out there every day, every night, sometimes working without any rest for multiple shifts, multiple days, and there's a significant burnout. Nurses, doctors have died young. And so that is significant. It is something that the Health Authority of Anguilla has looked into. In fact, the chairman, Dr. Bryan, did mention at the opening of the Central Polyclinic about wellness days and about, on your birthday, you get the days off. These are little things that can be done, but they go a long way. And one of the issues that we have with general surgery right now, recruitment, is that we're expecting that there's one surgeon who has to cover 24/7, 365 days a year. But that
Can't be
is
done.
not possible. I mean, when you have to listen for that call every day, every night, you're sleeping with one ear open because you never know when the phone is going to go off and you have to go in. That creates a lot of stress that I don't think that many surgeons these days want to do that, especially for what we pay them here in Anguilla. I mean, you're basically paying here in Anguilla in EC dollars what they can make elsewhere in US dollars. And it's not fair. So that is something that we're now looking at, how we can make it more attractive to bring surgeons, other specialists. I mean, we have one pediatrician in Anguilla, and I mean, during the pandemic, she basically had worked without vacation for over a year. I mean, it's not tenable and it's not sustainable.
Right.
We have to be able to, medical people, healthcare professionals are human too.
I'm hearing here, Premier, that there's serious concern and effort being shown to fix the state of health in Anguilla.
Has
If I
to.
can put it,
Yes,
if I can put it
definitely.
out there. I'm getting here that we've been at a place so long where the things that we complain about, I think if people are listening now and paying attention, they'll understand that it's not that we don't want to provide these services for our people.
Correct.
Financially, we haven't forecasted or budgeted or been in a place to do so, and that's something that you're addressing now.
Yeah, I like what you said, been a place to do so, because I think that if you think about it, and during the budget speech I alluded to that,
Yes.
$51 million that we have to pay in debt this year, 2022. If we didn't have that significant debt and debt servicing that we have to do, that is money that could have been used for those types of services.
Yes.
We could have paid for the specialists that we
Right.
need and bring in the extra one maybe on a part-time basis that can relieve
Right.
the ones that are being overburdened, overworked. And then some people talk about the attitude of health personnel that they may be a little short at times. But I said, give them a break.
If you work in all week, every day,
you can say,
like, come on. When I go home, right? you can ask my sister, you can ask my brother. Like, they can't ask me a question when I go home. They can't ask me if I lock the Jeep or if it's raining outside.
yeah.
They have learned to speak to me in sentences because I get asked questions so much. And if that's me, imagine our nurses,
Who has
that
somebody's life in their hands.
in their hands
24/7.
24/7. They don't ever come
Yeah.
down. Like, I mean, it's a bit mentally draining.
you can't shut off. And,
Yeah,
and
so and I've noticed something that you have spoken to on several occasions, just about the commitment of our healthcare professionals or civil servants, and it's a bit disheartening for me when I see persons, and I hope nobody thinks that I'm being political now, but it's something that grinds my gears. When you see persons want to attack certain things that the civil service the health professionals do, and the decisions that are made when they don't have the information.
That's right.
These things are not made in silo. You have the technocrats that report to the department heads, and then the PSs, and then the ministers, and we've been getting that through the show. Like the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary, she didn't give us much, being the bridge, but she sat down and she spoke how everything connects.
Right.
And now
Yes.
we're hearing from you, Premier, on how everything connects in health and where we're going.
Yes.
And how the relationships, even throughout the region, the Caribbean, can pan out and work for us. So it's good to know these things. It's good to see a little bit behind the, what do you call that screen?
behind the curtains.
The way in the house. So what's that? The gurney? I don't know what it's called.
Oh man,
I'm looking for. I'm just
Gurney's
trying
what
to
you
say.
push.
Okay, I'm just trying to say.
But we behind the curtains.
We're behind the curtains now.
Yes. And
We're
looking
under the
out.
bright lights. We can see a little bit more as to
yes.
what's going on in health, and we really appreciate that. I can't let you leave. I can't run out the show. We got about 4 more minutes without us talking about the MRI machine. Like, where we at with that?
Okay.
Let us know.
Yes, so MRI machine, and when Aurora, which was Cousinot, was being bought by
Schultz?
Mr. Richard Schultz, the Best Buy Corporation in the U.S., and one of the things we put in the MOU was that there has to be a social project, and at that time we felt that healthcare was paramount,
Right.
priority, and so we got him to commit to an MRI machine for
Nice.
Anguilla. And he has paid for it. It's right now in Dallas, Texas. We got the so before they will ship it to Anguilla, they say we have to have a concrete pad for it because
Okay.
it's a containerized MRI machine.
Okay.
So concrete pad, I got Mr. Schultz's foundation to also pay for that.
Okay.
And that cost over $18,000 US to do the concrete pad because it has to be reinforced. It has to be
Okay.
big enough for the machine and the container it's in. Then the electrical connection. That was another 50-something thousand US just for the electrical connection. So I got Mr. Robert Seamus. He has a villa at Four Seasons. He's paid for that.
Wow.
So we got that done now. And now it's a matter of them finalizing the machine and getting it shipped to us. And that, we're going to have to pay for storage, for shipping, to get it here, to get it plugged in.
Right.
We got to get our technicians,
An island to commission it. Right.
Exactly, and then we have to have those who are going to be working, doing the
Specialists
MRIs
again.
in the, so health authority is working with me to get that done, so that we have our radiographers trained to be able to do MRIs, and then we have to have a radiologist to read the MRIs, and so all of this we are working on happening in tandem. It's not just you bring
Yeah,
it in,
machine.
plug it in, and you got a machine,
It's
and
not
it
an
looks
iron.
pretty. No.
But I
But
think what
think about what that will do, though. Right now, we have a lot of young people that are getting strokes.
Yes.
Young people that have a lot of neurologic problems. They may have had trauma, or it just happens, and they need to get MRIs to look at that, because MRIs are better to look at soft tissue injuries,
Right.
look at soft tissue diseases, and rather than a CT scanner,
Right.
which looks more at bone, and they're better for that. So once we have that, then we don't have to send people to San Martin or to Antigua or to Puerto Rico or to Miami to get MRIs, or to the Cayman Islands. They can get them here. Then we have a better idea of the level of disease, the process that's going on, and then if we need to send them, then we can. But if it is something that we know can be treated here,
Yes.
and even treated with telemedicine, because now you can ship those images to a neurologist
That is
somewhere,
true.
or to and then they can say, okay, treat this, and this. That's how we do it, and it's really going to
Global
help.
village.
Exactly. You got it. So
Global
those are
village.
all the things that we're working on that we need to do. I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt
no,
you.
No, God, it is all interesting stuff, and I know that we are so close and out of time, but I cannot. You brought something up because I've seen persons say, "Well, the MRI machine was donated, the pad was donated, all of this stuff was donated, the electrical connection that you just spoke about." But they're going to still charge us a whole lot of money to use the MRI. But you just spoke about all those other things that are still needed. You need persons who will operate the MRI. You
That's
need
right.
persons who will read those images. And so there's still a cost associated,
Definitely.
even though
And the maintenance
those-
contract alone is going to be over $100,000 a year.
Premier.
So
And so I don't even want to cut you off,
Oh my
Ivan,
God.
but it is the one thing that we have not spoken about. We kind of danced around it a little bit, and we speak about healthcare costs increasing.
yes,
And I know, and I'm going to bring this up, one of the areas that you campaigned on was to ensure that the elderly have access to free healthcare.
definitely.
How soon do you see that being able to be implemented?
Well, if everything goes well, we're hoping this year.
Okay.
Because it's in the medium-term economic fiscal plan. We just commissioned the actuarial study to determine what it's going to cost. And if we can afford it this year, we're going to implement it this year. But you have to know how much it's going to cost. So what we're doing is we were waiting for the census to know how many 70 years and plus persons we had. But we can't wait for that.
Yeah, kind of sense.
so-
So push back out as well.
push back a little bit.
Yeah.
So what we did is we getting information from health authority, from the private sectors to find out, what it has been costing to
Yeah.
provide care here in Anguilla for the 70 years and older. And then using that information, we've sent that to the actuary, and they will give us an idea. They're saying within 6 to 8 weeks we'll get all the information back as to the cost, and then from there we'll then determine what we can afford, whether we have to do it in a phased manner, covering medications and then diagnostics and then medical and surgical, or if we can do it all at once based on what it's going to cost.
So Premier, I can't let us jump over this because I this is what Progress Report is all about. This is for the record now. Another plug.
And that's another.
So you're saying that we have to do this actuarial study.
Yes.
We were waiting on the census figures.
Correct.
We know the census was pushed back. Let's paint the picture for those out there. Census was pushed back.
It was supposed to be done in 2020, got pushed back, even got pushed back a little
Again?
because of the by-election.
Right.
Yes.
Good. So we can't wait any longer.
Correct.
Because we're concerned about our citizens, our
Definitely.
senior citizens.
Definitely.
So we find out another way to get this information. And there's a great possibility within the next 2 to 3 months that we can have an idea of what we can do for our seniors. That's important to note. I want to touch back on something because I'm finding, when I started, I told you that I had this ambitious plan to ensure that Anguillians read. And we put out a lot of press releases and stuff. But jumping back to the MRI machine, I remember there was some conversation that the government denied a private practice here having an MRI machine. But that was not the case because government had one commission donated, so this practice decided to forego bringing in an MRI machine. Is that the case?
Well, it's kind of everything dovetails into each other.
Okay.
In fact, since that machine was going to be donated, that private practice decided the one they were getting, they just basically turned it over and allowed the private, Mr. Schultz Foundation to donate that one to the hospital. But that practice needed an MRI to do specific types of testing, diagnostics, peripheral, so for an orthopedic surgeon to be able to, and so we also passed in the House, the duty-free concessions for them to bring in a separate MRI that has a specific purpose. So they don't compete with the one that goes to the Health Authority of Anguilla. But again, the issue was not that we didn't want the private practice or we wouldn't have given duty-free concessions. It's just that if it's going to be donated to the government or to the Health Authority of Anguilla, do that, and then the private practice was able to get a complimentary MRI that they could use for the specific purposes.
Okay, so we have an MRI that's going to solve
general purposes
and one for specific purposes.
That's correct.
On island.
Both will be on island.
Both will be on island. I think that's something to celebrate, other than hearing that government is kind of trying to circumvent people's business.
Exactly.
And that is for the record.
And that is for the record.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I mean we got lambasted.
You telling me?
Including by the past Minister of Health.
You telling me about I got lambasted. I was just the one putting out. I was like, what?
You would think that, it was really unfortunate that persons didn't understand what was going on before they jumped to conclusions. And there's only one person that apologized. One person. Not the former Minister of Health. One person who had made a comment apologized for jumping the gun after speaking with the center that was bringing in the machine. I think that Anguillians need to be fair.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I find that I am disheartened by, is that if you jump to conclusions when you don't have all the information, when you get the information,
jump to the same conclusion.
Exactly.
I
wouldn't touch that. I'm gonna leave that right there. I wouldn't touch that because I could jump on something that literally was last week. But I'm gonna leave that alone.
As we are so far out of time.
No, this is the premiere. We have to give the premiere his time.
The premiere gets its time, and health gets its time because again, you stated it so correctly. Health is wealth.
Definitely.
We definitely need to be concerned about the health of our nation. This is going to be an ongoing conversation.
Yes.
It is clear that the time that we have allotted is not enough to discuss the issues as it relates to health. Just jumping back in there a little bit, we definitely are going to do a show on mental health.
Yes,
we're going to really take some time to look into that. But Dr. Webster, thank you so much for being here with us. This has been another informative episode of Progress Report. And if you take nothing from our almost hour-long session...
Why do you have to tell them that?
If you take nothing from this, I think one of the biggest takeaways that will excite most persons is to hear that we are very close to at least implementing, either in part or in whole, free medical services for our elderly. And so that for me is a major takeaway, and we look forward to having you back again.
And now that we've passed that and we're winding now, and I just want, this is gonna happen before, like we say, we're taping now, couple hours away from the race. I want predictions. I'm not gonna leave you guys leave here. Unbiased predictions. What do you think is happening in the Anguilla Day boat race?
Ivan, you do realize that by the time this is aired, the
race will
will
be
be over.
and the talk will be happening. So I want to know if somebody's gonna be seen as a prophet or somebody's gonna be seen as a betting man or a betting woman. I know you got light in peace. You already told me so last time. And the Premier likes unidentified flying objects.
I mean,
The light in peace is home. The light in peace is everything. But the light in peace will cause me to reach in the hospital and to access those services because they always give me heart palpitations.
I thought once you said UFO, that was it.
So who you got?
You know,
UFO.
I am not a betting person. I'm not a gambling person. I tend to look at stats. And if the past years and some recent past races have been any indication, I think Dr. Webster is going to have to look out for the Real Deal or the Sonic. They have definitely been tearing up the waters. I'm still holding on hope for the light.
I think that the member for Road North paid her off to say that, you know? I think so.
Well, we got 30 seconds. And I'm going to say this. This is the top three. And in this order. Satellite, Real Deal, Sonic, 3, UFO, Light and Peace. Cut it before she says anything else. Thank you for joining us on Progress Report, and we'll check these statistics after the race.